Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's DigitalOcean Tech Talk. We're going to talk about painless and efficient ways to do usability testing. I hope you're up for a good ride on some cool tips on conducting usability studies, which is basically a way to validate your ideas. We're going to go through what to do before, during, and after usability study. I'm going to show you, or I'm going to talk about a couple of tools that would be useful for you to go through and use them while you do a usability study before and after. I hope you enjoy it. My name is Rafael Mojica. I am the VP of User Experience at DigitalOcean. For those of you who don't know, DigitalOcean is a compute platform for those who want to launch a business. So come to us and we'll help you do that. This session will be recorded. You will receive an email with a link to the recording. It will also be hosted in our DigitalOcean YouTube channel. It will also be in our DigitalOcean community website, which is do.co/Tech Talks, and that is T as in Thomas, ECHTALKS. But again, you'll get an email with it. Great. If you have any questions during this session, please add them to the question box and we'll try to answer them at the end of the session. We'll leave about 10 minutes to answer questions. If we can't make it to your question, we will also answer them and put them in the websites that I mentioned already. And again, you'll get an email. Okay, so I hope you're ready and let's get the show started. So, okay, what will you get out of today? As I said, what, when, and with whom to validate your decisions. You will go through some tips on what to do before, during, and after a usability session, and some additional recommendations for successful usability testing. Now, why am I talking about your decisions? Well, this is not my saying, but I completely agree with it. If you are building something for someone else, you are making design decisions. Whether you are aware of it or not, whether you are the designer or not, whether you like it or not, you are making design decisions. And ideally, you should be validating your decisions with people that are close to your product or service. Now, why should I test or validate what I'm building? Let me show you a couple of examples. And let's go back long time ago to a time when we were able to go to events and travel and go to restaurants. Sorry if that gives you a little bit of anxiety with the current situation, but they're good examples. My wife and I were going to see Painless. We got the email on the left, which says a nice click view email tickets, which brings us to the right. And we're like, great, these are our tickets, right? There's a barcode there that we'll scan when we get there. But no, there's a sneaky line in the first email that says print your ticket out prior to arrival, which was not clear enough, not prominent enough. Example one. Example two, after going to see Painless, my wife and I were gonna fly to go to Mexico City to visit friends and family. So we wanted to add some movies to our iPad to watch on the flight, but there were too many. So we're trying to remove 51st Dates and looking for a delete button for undownload, nothing. So we went back to see the list of movies. There's no option here to, if you hold your tab, nothing. Go back and forth. Maybe if we go to the library of the downloaded, is there a way to delete here? You're seeing our taste in movies now. I'm not the one that chose that one. Oh, here. If you click on downloaded, there's a remove button. Again, not clear at all. Okay, next example. We arrived to Mexico and we wanted to make a reservation to go to a restaurant with some friends. This is a great Argentinian restaurant in Mexico called La Vaca Argentina. You can go to the gallery and see some pictures. Usually people do this on mobile phone. That's why I'm showing you a mobile example. You can see, okay, reservations, nothing happens. If I go to the arrow, nothing happens. Well, the list of restaurants or cities were actually below and the menu was not showing all of them. Fail again. You can see how our trip was going. Anyways, the fact of the matter is that people find a way to solve their problems. When we got to Mexico, we saw a couple of examples. If you have to carry long tubes in a taxi cab, well, you have to hold them on your own. If you need Kleenex or tissue paper, sorry for the goal, you put it in the actually headrest for your passengers. Now, the challenge is that, yes, people might find a way, but that way might be away from you and to your competitor. So be mindful of the decisions you make. Anyways, like I said, it could be with someone else. So in conclusion, you should be testing because it helps you validate your decisions, your design decisions. It actually gives you examples or an external point of view of what you're trying to do, someone outside of your day-to-day. And it also gives you the opportunity to talk to those who use or might use your product or services. You might not have even launched what you're building, so it can allow you to test with those who might be your users. Great. Another question, when? When should I be doing usability testing? Ideally always, but that's not the case. We live in the real life, so this cannot happen every time. So these are a couple of examples of when should you be actually conducting usability studies. If you have not talked to anyone, any of our users in a long time or ever, then you should be actually going through these sessions. When you're going through a major redesign, it would be important for you to do it. You might actually break something that it is working so far through this redesign. If you're adding new features or products or services to your ecosystem, you should be actually doing testing. If things are not working well, you might see your results from your metrics and things are going downhill or too many error messages, anything that is happening that is not going the path that you and your business wanted to go, then you should be doing this. When you do not know what's next, okay, so you've reached success. What should we build next? What should we offer next? Then you should be talking to your customers and users. When you don't want to waste time rebuilding, because this is a key point. Usually when you don't go through these processes, you end up having to redo things over and over again. So that's when. Question of, okay, so who should I bring to do usability testing? Who should I invite to do usability testing? This is a key factor, not just anyone. Even Facebook, who is used by millions of people around the world, has a specific target audience. And actually, maybe even some of your products might have a much narrower target for your users. You might have a company that sells products and services for different types of people. Then you should be testing with that type of people. So how do you realize who should these be, the people that you are actually testing with? Well, long story short, those who are close to your actual users, or actually your existing users, you could attract them as well. Think about who has the need you're trying to fulfill. Don't bring someone that has no use for a car. I live in Brooklyn. I don't have a car. Why would I go through usability testing of a car dealership if I don't even have a car? Who has the means to pay for your services? Who is within the age range of your targeting? You might be designing for the elderly or for teenagers. Don't invite someone outside of the age range. Who uses the equipment needed to use your services, etc., etc. That is how you start getting an idea on who to talk to get the feedback you need for a better design decision. Now, the other question I usually get, but how do I access them? Well, there are professional recruiting services out there. That's usually when your target audience is difficult to find. But it's usually easier if you go through a meetup, or you use social media and go to groups that fit the profile that I just showed you. You can go to Craigslist, Facebook, Twitter, etc., etc. Where you can find them where they need. Let's say you are working on an app to order coffee. Well, go to the coffee shop. Well, nowadays you can't, but go outside of the coffee shop and see if you find someone trying to order coffee or that bought coffee. That person might give you better feedback than someone that doesn't drink coffee. Great. Now that you have found them, then there's also the question of, but what if they're not the right person? What if I sent a huge email, I got 1,000 answers, but how do I know they're the right fit for what I'm trying to get feedback on? Well, I would suggest you go through a screener. A screener is basically a fancy word for a questionnaire that will allow you to understand who are you talking to and see if they're going to be the best person for you to talk to and get the feedback you need. You can ask questions like, do you visit this location frequently? How frequently? If this is the first time and last time they're going to go to that coffee shop, maybe they're not the best fit for you. How old are you? Remember we talked about age range. Have you done X in the last 2 months? That will tell you frequency of their actions and if they're actually a good fit for what you're trying to get. Have you needed I don't know, to rent a car in the last month or so? How often do you rent a car, etc., etc. So it's basically, again, a questionnaire that will help you identify if the person you're talking to is the right one. There's nothing wrong with telling them, thank you very much, I'll be in touch with you when something that fits what we're looking for fits your profile, or just invite them. More questions, but I am exactly my user. Why should I talk to someone if I also use this? That is not the right point of view. At DigitalOcean, half of us actually are engineers. And I get this commentary a lot. We are building for developers. We are developers. Why do we need to talk to them? We also use these tools. But you are too close to your product or service to be objective to what needs to change. So you need to talk to outsiders. But can't I just talk to the same people every time? Why do I have to be recruiting every time? Well, just like the first point, if you continuously talk to the same people, they will get too close to your product and not give you objective feedback. Can I just run an A/B test? Yeah, you could. But if you haven't gotten feedback on the 2 versions that you're testing, you might be testing 2 incorrect, 2 faulty, 2 not usable versions. So this is not a time to do an A/B testing just yet. I'll talk about it in a couple of slides. But isn't all this time consuming? Yes, it is. But remember when I talked about rebuilding a product that has already been built and put out there takes even more time than going through a couple of days of usability testing. Okay, how many people should you bring in to do the testing? You don't have to do 50 people usability testing. This was a study that Nielsen Norman Group, which is a firm very well known in my industry, user experience industry. And they realized that between 5 and 10 people is enough for you to get a usability testing. Actually, it's 5 and 8, somewhere around the time. If you talk to 5 to 8 people, the 9th, 10, 11, 12, you start getting the same information. So you don't have to go beyond 8 or 10. Now, there are some in our industry that talk about this test being a little bit faulty, but I actually haven't gotten a straight answer from them on, okay, then if it's not 5 to 8, then how many? They talk about it depends. So I would go with this unless you have the means to do even more. I wouldn't do any less. Now, fact of the matter is that any feedback is better than no feedback. So I know I say I wouldn't do less than 5, but if you do 1 or 2 people, it's better than not doing it with anyone else. Okay, so let's get to the actual session. What should you do, or some tips on what to do before a usability testing? First of all, recruiting. We already talked about who and how to attract them, but one of the recommendations I would have for you is schedule more people than you actually need. If I said 5 to 8, schedule 10, schedule 12. You will always have drop-offs. You will always have people that don't show up. So be prepared for that. It's okay to tell, if you get the 10 or the 12 that you recruited, that's even better. That's a good problem to have. It's okay to tell them, thank you for showing. I already have all the people I need. Here is your incentive anyways. I would still give them the incentive. We'll talk about it. So about that, offer some sort of incentive that will help you actually attract more people than if you just took on 1 hour of the time and they got nothing out of it. There's many options here. You can offer credits from their company. You can offer a gift card. You can offer product that you actually have. You can offer your time to give them feedback yourself. But there should always be an incentive for them to feel that they're also getting something out of it. Don't make it too big though, because then that crosses the threshold of them giving you biased information because they want just the incentive. I hope that makes sense. And when I talk about maybe having too many people that show up and you only need 5 to 8, again, it's okay to tell them, thank you, I already have enough people, but here's your incentive anyway for your troubles. Great. It would be useful for you to use a scheduling tool. One of the most used out there is Calendly. That way you don't have to be looking at your calendar or the person who is doing the interviewing's calendar. You can just automate it via a tool like this. The user can look at their calendar and choose the right time for them. Another important note, when you're scheduling the sessions, I would recommend for you to leave time in between sessions. Why? Sessions go longer than what you schedule for. You might need to adjust your questionnaire, or you might need to go to the bathroom or eat. There's always a good time for you to rest and prepare for the next time. So I would recommend 10, 15 minutes between each session. Okay. Again, we're still on before. We haven't arrived to the test itself. Before you are actually testing, you need to know exactly what you'll be testing. If you just show them your website, your mobile application, or your service in a store or something like that, you are not going to get the exact answers. You need to be very clear on what exactly are you wanting to evaluate. What are the design decisions you want to get feedback on? So to do that, you can ask yourself some questions like, what is your business objective? What is the need that your user has that you're trying to fulfill? So delineate the task that you want the user to go through so that you get feedback on that specific task. You can also test a specific area. If you have a website, you might want to test the onboarding process or the purchasing process or finding an item. If you have the possibility, I would suggest you test a whole journey, not just the product or the service you're actually testing, but there's things that users do or customers do before arriving to your product or service, and there's things that your users do after the product and service. Examples, I just gave you one. Most likely, whomever designed that experience to go to a talk at the New York Times building did not realize the fact that people might be confused and bring their phone to the event instead of a print because they didn't test it. You need to be mindful of the consequences of your design decisions. Imagine that the New York Times now has to recruit more people to deal with those who arrive without printer. Maybe they have to have a printer at hand for people to actually print it, etc., etc. Your decisions have consequences beyond what you're doing. That is why it's better to actually test the journey, not just the product and service. And most importantly here, how do I remember all these things? Well, I would create a discussion guide, which is basically a flow that you should follow throughout the sessions for two reasons. One, you don't have to remember every single questions that you want to ask them. Two, it will be a consistent test. So you will have much more objective feedback because you're asking the same or similar questions to everyone. And most importantly, be flexible. Things might have to change from one user to another. You're kind of doing science here. So the fewer variables you introduce into your test, the better. The more consistent it is, the better. That's why you're bringing the same type of people that have the exact same needs, and you're asking them the same questions and going through the same flow. Okay, now we're getting closer. Right before the test starts, when they get to you or when you get to them, and you are close, you are with the user, the customer, and you want to start the session, make them feel at ease. Some people get nervous in these kinds of situations. So welcome them to the session. You can tell them this is not a test for you. We are trying to evaluate the product or the service, not you. Because of that, there are no right or wrong answers to whatever you tell me on this situation. I just want to hear what you think about it, how you use it. And some of us say, I did not design this, I did not build this. You're not going to hurt my feelings with the feedback you give me. It is usually a lie, but it's a good lie. It's okay. I give you permission to lie. You should also go through any legalese that either you or your company would like to go through. If you're recording the session, they need to know that you're recording the session. Here in the United States, for example, some states, for some states, it's illegal for you to record someone without their permission. So you might want to actually tell them, make it part of that. Have them sign anything that you or your company needs them to sign. And give them time to process whatever they're trying to sign or the consequences of saying, yes, please record me. Now, if they say, no, don't record me, I wouldn't stop the session. Just don't record them, get their feedback regardless, take better notes because you're not going to have a recording, but it's still a valuable session, even though it wasn't recorded. It's okay. It has happened to me. Okay, last but not least, you should talk to them on what the session will cover. So today I'm going to show you XYZ. At the end, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and it's going to take about 45 minutes, and then we'll be done so that they know exactly what to expect from the session. Okay, now we got to the session itself. Some tips on what to do during your usability study. One of the best things I learned earlier in my career is to do a warm-up. That actually brings the users or customers to the right mindset. So ask them, when was the last time you did X? Again, if you're testing an app to order coffee, you can ask them, when was the last time you went to have coffee? Did you order it when you get there, or did you pre-order online? How did the experience go? That brings your users to the right mindset and to a great framework for you to get even better feedback than if you cold ask them, what do you think about this? You can ask them, how did it go? I wouldn't go exactly into details on what would you change, because then now they're giving you feedback about that. Just bring them to that mindset. Okay, also, when you are now going through your task, the journey that you're trying to test, ask them to describe what they're thinking, what the outcome of the task was. Ask them, what would you do here if you didn't accomplish that? Use mostly open questions. Why is that? Why do I recommend open questions? Well, open questions give you more information than an answer like yes, no, maybe. They tend to provide motivations from the user, which is highly useful for you when you're making design decisions. Understanding the motivation of the user is highly valuable. It will prevent you from biasing the or leading the witness. If you ask, did you like it or wasn't it great, you are biasing them. Instead, asking things like, what were you expecting to happen? Or what would you do now if they pause? You can always ask them, what are you thinking? We usually, at the beginning of the sessions, we tend to ask them, please turn your brain on, turn your brain speakerphone on because I can't tell what you're thinking. It would be great if you tell me everything that you're thinking. But it's okay to ask them if they pause. What are your thoughts right now? What are you feeling right now? Why did you stop? All those open questions are valuable. Which information do you need to move forward with the process? Do you have everything that you need to move forward? What are you thinking right now? Like we said, and so forth and so on. Open questions. But yes, that is a very qualitative way of doing it, but there's also space for a quantitativeness. You can, at the end of a session, at the end of a task, you can ask CSAT. Basically, how satisfied are you with X? You can ask a system usability scale, which is basically a way to measuring usability with specific questions from the industry. I'm not going to go through them. You can always Google what these are and how to conduct them. They're just tips on you could do this. You could go through a principle-based course. If your company, if you have a list of design principles that you want to accomplish, well, you can ask your users questions about how closely what you show them fits the principle you're trying to fulfill. You can also ask for a net promoting score. How likely are you to recommend this after you went through it? This is also useful for you to have when you're talking about the results of your testing. You're not only going to bring commentary, which is qualitative, you can also bring quantitative measurements. Let's say that you run this again. That will show you quantitatively how well or bad you did in your next iteration. Okay, other considerations during your session. Keep track of time. Remember that you have only a limited amount of time to run through 5 people. Especially if you're doing it the same day, fit it on 45 minutes, fit it on an hour. So you should be keeping track of time. Keep the subjects on track. Usually some of them get to tell you the story of how they got there and how the subway was a mess. Tell them basically, oh, thanks for sharing that. Let's go through what we need to do. Remember your poker face. Here in the US, and if you play poker, we use this a lot when if they tell you something you don't like or it's funny, you are actually being the scientist right now. So be zen in the moment and say, oh, why do you think that way? Or why did you say so? Instead of actually making a face that will actually tend to bias them. If you can, have an observer help you take notes or helping you keep track of the time. That is always useful because then if you're doing the questioning, if you're doing the asking, you don't have to worry about taking the notes yourself. One of the reasons why I ask you to leave time between sessions is because you might want to adjust after every session. There's some teams that actually change some designs, change some code based on feedback from one session to the next one and see what happened. Now, if you do that, it is of the utmost importance that you actually take note of the changes so that you can see when was the change and how it affected the following sessions. So just don't willy-nilly change it and don't record it because then you will have a faulty test. Very important here, you are not assessing if they like it. This is not art. You are designing, you're making design decisions, you're building for someone else. You are assessing, you're testing how usable it is and if the user accomplished the task. Plus, you might be using a prototype that is not in the best view just yet, so don't try testing the likability of it. One of the things you can do also is do usability testing on your competitors. You can bring other applications that do the same that you're trying to do and assess how usable or not usable they are. You can learn a lot from a session like that when you're actually testing your on your competitors' usability. Last but not least, it won't be perfect. You are dealing with subjects. We will be subjective. But hey, you're getting feedback after all, and it will help you make better decisions. Okay, I learned this a lot. I learned this a bit earlier in my career. If all else fails, let's say the person cannot get on track, your prototype broke, you can't record it, the user is giving you terrible feedback or very vague answers. There's nothing wrong with stopping the session and say, thank you very much for your feedback. Here's your incentive. We'll be in touch later. Or if the subject actually is someone that can give you information on the market or their motivations, you can stop the session and just have a conversation about it. It's not going to be a usability testing, but it's still going to be external information about you, something you're trying to do better. Why would I do that? Why? You went through the screening, you went through identifying the user and their needs. A conversation with that person will be extremely valuable, even if you didn't actually test the task at hand. Okay, you're done with all your sessions. What do I do with all this information? Okay, collect it in one place. Start finding patterns on the feedback. There's an exercise that we use a lot called an affinity mapping, when you actually start putting together kernels of feedback that actually, as a bundle, is a much more mature and well-rounded insight. You can do rainbow spreadsheets in which you actually color the different types of feedback. And if you actually step back, quite literally or figuratively, you can see where the reds and the greens and the yellows are. You can actually prioritize the findings based on severity and frequency. Severity being, how badly is this? Are users not able to actually execute what they want to execute? Or frequency, how often will this happen, but is not as severe? Third most important thing is sharing your findings. Email the executives or your boss with a quick pain points. So show them progress right away. You can do a quick sharing session with crucial points and next steps. You can, some tools actually allow you to create highlight reels. You can send an email with a 1-minute video with highlights on the feedback. But most importantly, do not spend 2 weeks writing a report that no one will read. Make this feedback as actionable as possible, as soon as possible. Okay, what do you do after the fact with your actual users? Well, follow up quickly with the compensation you promised. You can send a thank you note. And if you promised something like sending them a link to X, share next steps with them. This is what we're gonna do with your feedback, or I would be happy to invite you to testing the next iteration, etc., etc. Okay, as I was saying, make them actionable. Act on your finding as soon as possible. So quickly move to the next iteration. Delegate some work if you need to. Iterate, do an iteration and do another testing. Sometimes we've done testing 3 weeks in a row because the feedback is so good and we have the time, or we actually dedicated time to the iterations. And within the span of 2 or 3 weeks, you will have a rich set of information that will make your design and building decisions much more effective. You can also start from scratch. If whatever you got is terrible feedback or not what you wanted to hear, there's nothing wrong with starting from scratch. You're still on time. Remember, you're not gonna have to rebuild everything. You're still at the prototyping stage because ideally you're doing this earlier in your process, right? Okay. You can also make a case for a change. If someone actually was telling you, no, that's not the right decision, you can use this external feedback to say, Here, this is what 10 people told me about it. Here, 8 out of 10 were not able to accomplish X. See what I mean when I was telling you X? You can use this information, this feedback, to make a case to someone that is going against what you're trying to do. Now, remember we talked about A/B testings? This is now the time where you can do an A/B test. Why? Because you have much more information for you to decide on what the 2, 3 versions could be. You could actually do a usability A/B testing in which you're actually doing this session about your competitor, about yours. The trick there is do not tell your users, the person who is giving you feedback, which one is yours. You could tell them at the end. That helps you by not biasing them, because if they know that this version is yours, they will tend to give you better feedback from yours than on the competitor. So you can say, "Hi, I'm going to show you 2 versions with 2 different companies. I'm not going to tell you which one's mine. I want to get actual feedback from you on both. I can tell you." Great. Some more questions I usually get, but do I have to test everything or every time I make a change? No, you don't have to. Remember your business objectives. Remember the highest need of the user. Those are the things you need to actually execute. Things that are well documented in the industry, things that are already patterns that other companies use and people are familiar with them, you don't necessarily have to test all those steps. What if I have no budget? If you do it in the down low, this could cost you pennies. Again, especially if you offer credits or a $10 gift card or a cup of coffee. Believe me, this will be cheaper than you having to redo everything again, or than seeing your click-throughs go down, or than seeing your your cards go empty. What if I have no time? Same as the previous one. It will take you more time to redo everything than taking 2 or 3 days to actually go through an exercise. Okay, in the US, there's this saying, rinse and repeat, which means you should not do this only once. You do it over and over again, just like you do with your dishes, especially right now. Probably you're washing dishes a lot these days. So like they say, ABT, always be testing. It's easier to say ABT than always be in touch with those who use or might use your product and services in order to have a fresh and outside perspective so that you are on top of issues or potential opportunities for improvement in the future. I cannot put that in an initialism or an acronym. So ABT is short enough for you to remember that. Always be in touch, always get feedback. Okay, if you want to take a screenshot, although you're going to get this in email, take a screenshot of this screen. This is basically your checklist to do a usability study effectively. Make a list of the right candidates, or who is the right candidate. Write down your invitation. Go through a screener to get the right people. Define what you're trying to test. Make a discussion guide. Prototype with all your touch points, ideally. If not, just do the product or service. Ways to record the sessions. These 2 products, online products, are very good for that. Usertesting.com, lookback.com. Actually, at DigitalOcean, we use Lookback. Not endorsing them, but they're really good. And again, your synthesizing tools. Okay. Great. That's it. I'm going to stay here in case you want to write it or take some screenshots. And I hope that is useful for you, and we're going to answer some questions. I hope there's so many questions. Do we have questions?
Yes, we have questions. And to the audience, if you have any further questions, please type them in the questions box and we'll answer them live now. First question. Great. What percentage of my budget would you recommend to set aside for incentives for a usability study?
Great question. I am dealing with that myself because we are doing usability testing for many other teams, and it is all coming out of my budget. If we're talking about incentives, I don't want to call it a rule of thumb here, but at least in the US, we usually go if a session is about an hour, between 45 minutes to an hour, we give them between $30 to $50 if you have the budget. If not, believe me, if you give someone a $10 gift card, it is enough for 30 to 45 minutes of their time. So it's not necessarily about budget, but how much is the time of your user valued for you to actually get them to come to you, or for them to allow you to go to you. It's more a case of the value of the time of who you're talking to than your internal budget. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Is it okay to have more than one researcher in a usability study? Should there only be one person on my team during this session? Can there be more?
Great question. I would recommend that only one person does the asking and the other person does the note taking, because it tends to confuse the user. There might be hidden agendas with someone else in the room. So I would recommend that it's only one person, the one asking the questions. I've been there and it doesn't work. Believe me. Next question.
Cool. As far as I know, the FDA requires 15 participants for usability testing. Is it just to be sure to cover problems, or why do you think this is useful?
The FTA or FDA?
The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration.
Oh, but those are not usability tests. You're testing if you're going to kill someone with something. I mean, if you can do 15 people, go ahead. But I don't think it's necessary. I mean, they're two different kinds of tests. So I wouldn't go with an FDA recommendation for something like this. Now, if you're testing a food or a drug, then follow the FDA guidelines. Yes, by no means listen to me, listen to them.
The audience member who asked this question, apologies if we didn't understand it quite right. Let us know if we answered the question correctly.
That is
All
okay.
Right. How built out should a product be to have an effective test?
Great question. Remember when I say always be testing? I would actually test at different points of fidelity. You can do a paper prototype usability test and get a lot of information. Then when you are in your next iteration, do it again and do it again. What I want, there's a fine balance here of doing too much or going too far in your actual execution, so that when you get your feedback might be too late. So you need to find that balance to say, do it on time so that you have, depending on what you're building, but you have 2 weeks, 2 months to do iterations from the feedback you got. But it depends on how advanced you are in your process. I would not do it 2 weeks before launch, because then it would be too late.
How do you stay unbiased if you're the designer or developer? Would you recommend that if it's your baby to not be the facilitator?
Great question. If you are too close to it, if it is your baby, then yes, I would recommend someone else going through the motions. But again, as there are some techniques that you can follow, because there's not always the way for someone else to do it. Remember the poker face. Remember to tell them you didn't design it. But if you feel you're not going to be able to resist if someone tells you, this sucks, it's ugly, then yes, let someone else do it.
Great. So let's say I've already talked to 5 to 10 people. All these people tell me different things. So I don't know what's going on. I still don't have a clear answer. What do I do now?
If you can't find a pattern in the feedback, that's a good question. I would either do I would rerun the test, but I would evaluate the questions that I'm asking. I would question if I actually went through the exact same flow with everyone. And if all else fails, maybe your design is actually so bad that people are giving you all the feedback you needed to do. And you might have to address every single piece of feedback individually. But that's what I would do. I would first study if I actually asked the same questions to everyone, if everyone went through the same flow, if I brought the same people to the room, and last but not, if everything fails, and check your design, because it might be too bad that everyone is giving you a different kind of feedback. You might actually have to break your tests into smaller chunks, because each chunk might need a specific session on its own. Good question. But if you follow the rules, usually that doesn't happen.
Thanks. We're a small bootstrapped startup and we don't really know how to do this. We haven't done this before. Should we try to do this ourselves following your method, or can we go with an agency that can help us? What should we do?
I think you answer your own question right there. Be honest with yourself. What did I tell you? You can do this on your own. Any feedback is better than no feedback. I don't think you have the budget to hire an external company to do this for you. I would not recommend it. Do it yourself. Follow these instructions. Feel free to ask me questions on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help. But you can do, if you follow this, that's why we do this thing, so that you don't have to hire a company. You can do it on your own, especially if you're a small bootstrap company.
Wonderful.
I believe in you.
Thank you, Rafael. It's so motivating. How do you advocate more time for usability testing when you get resistance from stakeholders?
Oh, the perennial question of others not wanting to do this. You're not gonna like this answer, but I've done this behind people's backs. If you have to go that far. Why? Because it is very useful information. You could do 2 people, you could do 3 people on a weekend. You could do it remotely. Now you can only do it remotely. You can do it remotely. Again, any feedback is better than no feedback. You could do it very quickly. You could do it with very little budget. To a degree, you don't need permission to run something like this. Again, unless you're doing with like government secrets, then you might have to go through some hoops, but there's always a way. And when you have this feedback, you will be able to tell them, I spoke to different people and this is what they told me, external people. Now can I have some more money and time to do this? Because we look at the trends that I'm getting with very few questions.
Thank you.
Don't get fired though, don't get fired. Or maybe you don't want to work there. Maybe you don't want to work there. Go work somewhere else where they appreciate this, where they appreciate you.
How do you recommend finding users on a minimal budget during the pandemic? For example, is there an alternative to guerrilla testing, which may not be safe right now?
Right. Great question. We have emailed, well, examples in DigitalOcean, for example, 3/4 of our users are international. So very little way of doing guerrilla testing or in-person testing. So we email our users that fit the pattern that you're trying to look for and have a session remotely. Lookback.com actually helps you do remote usability sessions. I would go to a Facebook, Twitter, meetup virtual group and send an invitation there. The companies that do recruiting professionally can actually help you to access people and go through the session virtually. We have not stopped doing usability testing because of the pandemic. It is possible to do it remotely. Usertesting.com actually all happens remotely. If you set up your test online, it happens online, so you don't have to be in person to do it. Good question.
How do you deal with plugin guidelines or general standards that users don't understand, but you must use in your product? So for example, Apple guidelines.
Well, I'm going to be sneaky here, but what if you test the guideline as well as part of your testing? Remember when I talk about journey? The journey also has touch points. When you open an Apple product, there's instructions there. You can also do usability testing on instructions. Was the user able to put it together? Was the user able to turn on the machine and set it up the way they wanted? You can also do usability testing and get feedback on these guidelines because not everyone has the same technical skill set. There, I gave you more work, but it'll be better.
Thank you. I'm going to wait a few more minutes to see if more questions come in.
Great.
That was our last question for now.
Okay.
We got some great feedback here. Someone says they found it amazing and they need to share this with their boss. So for people who are looking for this talk, I'm going to paste the link. I'm going to paste the link to this in the chat right now, and you'll also get this link via email. We will take some time to edit the video a little bit before we post it, so it will be a few days before we post the video itself, but you will be able to find the video on this page.
Great.
Right.
Well,
Looks like that was our last question. Rafael, do you have any parting words or words of wisdom for everyone in the audience?
I do. First of all, thank you for coming. I hope this was useful to you and it will be valuable for you in the future. Do share it because this could be used anywhere at any point. But parting words, remember, if you're building something for someone else, you're making design decisions. So you have to validate that your decisions are the right one for your business and for your users. There, you can do this with very little time, with very little money. There are countless of articles out there that talk about this, but you can start with this quick guideline. And most importantly, remember that some feedback is way better than no feedback. So go out there and get some feedback. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rafael. Actually, we got 2 more questions if you're open to answering them. Technically, have 5 more minutes left. One audience member who also tuned into Jake's webinar recently, he was talking about minimum lovable products. So do you ever perform testing on minimum lovable products?
Yes, definitely. If I remember correctly, Jake talks about a product that will help users go from A to Z. You need to validate that that minimal level product will actually help the user accomplish the product. Otherwise, it is not lovable. So it is not actually accomplish the task of that version, that phase of the product. Definitely.
All right, I hope I'm getting this question right here. Should we provide multiple options to the user while performing these tests, or give one to analyze their feedback and then try another option with another user?
Great question. You can do an A/B usability testing. My recommendation there would be to be very clear with the user. I will show you 2 versions. I will, again, most importantly, I don't want to know which one you like better. I want to know which one is more usable. Now, trick here is do test A and then B with one user, and then B and then A with another user. So basically switch the order in which you show the versions, because people tend to like things that they see first. So if you want to be unbiased, you want to create an unbiased test, switch the order. Subject 1 says AB, subject 2 says goes through BA, 3 AB, 4 BA. and so forth and so on.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions here. In your experience, what type of incentive works better for the people in your usability studies? Money, gift cards, something else?
Well, as they say here in the US, cash is king. So usually either cash or a gift card works best. But if they like your company, if they like a product, credits also do a good trick there. I would say that the least useful one is product itself, especially product that the user won't have a use for.
Got it. Any advice, general advice for testing or launching a new social network?
There's no difference than if you were doing e-commerce. You have to define what your business objectives are. You need to define what is the user want, what can the user get out of this network? What are the tasks you want them to go through? What is the success of the task? And test that. If you're testing uploading a picture, if you're testing people submitting commentaries, people reacting to comments, making a group, all those are tasks that you can test. Even if it's not a physical product or even actual application online, it's a community, there are tasks that people need to go through. You are testing if those tasks are accomplished. No difference.
One last question. I think someone asked a similar question earlier on, which is, what do you do if your internal team do not care about testing or that it's necessary? How do you find the tools to convince them?
Yes, again.
Are there tools to convince them besides leaving the company, Rafael?
Quit now. No, you can do it on your own time if you're able to do it and then provide that feedback. There's always someone in the company that believes you and that is in the same wavelength as you. Recruit them and use them to help you. There are articles out there that talk about the benefits of doing usability testing. Show them this video. Show them the examples. You can do a recording. A very, very easy tool to do is record someone using your product. Even if it's one person, record someone using the product and failing at the task you want them to do, and send that video to whomever is not doing it. And then tell them, we need to understand why people are going through this. We need to talk to more people to tell us what the challenges they're having right now. If someone was designing a taxi in Mexico City, I will send them that picture that I showed you at the beginning and say, what the hell?
Thank you so much, Rafael. That's a beautiful note to end on. To the audience, thank you so much for tuning in today. We loved your questions and we look forward to answering more of them in the future. Let us know how we did on this webinar and tell us what other topics you'd like to hear more about. We hope to have you tune in again soon. Thank you and have a great week.
Thanks, everyone.